On March 23, 2021, a 1,300-foot container ship called the Ever Given entered the Suez Canal. High winds and a sandstorm pushed it off course. One ship got stuck because of wind and bad luck. But the global disruption had almost nothing to do with the weather. It happened because the global economy depends on a handful of narrow passages that almost everything has to pass through. If even one of them stops working, your grocery store might not stay full for long. And whenever one is threatened, the price of energy can move before you've even made it to the gas station. So this isn't really a story about one ship. It's about why the world's most connected economy depends on fewer than a dozen places on the map, and what happens when just one of them stops working. Almost everything moving between the world's largest economies has to squeeze through just a handful of places. Some are natural straits, others are canals dug by humans. Together, they act like valves on the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz, between Iran and Oman. The Suez Canal and its southern approach through Bab el-Mandeb. The Strait of Malacca, between the Malaysian Peninsula and Sumatra. The Panama Canal, cutting across Central America. Between them, these passages carry the oil, grain, consumer electronics, pharmaceuticals, and manufactured goods that keep modern economies running. Nobody designed this map. Nobody voted on it. Geography made the decision millions of years before the first cargo ship ever sailed. Continents block movement. Peninsulas funnel it. Oceans connect the world, but only through a limited number of practical routes. The Indian Ocean has no northern exit except through the Persian Gulf or the Red Sea. Sailing around Southeast Asia adds more than 3,000 miles between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Before the Panama Canal, ships traveling between the Atlantic and Pacific had to round Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America, a route so long and dangerous that it was a last resort. The Panama Canal didn't create a trade route. It exploited the only place where one could realistically be built. Modern shipping didn't choose these routes because they were convenient. It chose them because there were almost no alternatives. At its narrowest point near Singapore, the Strait of Malacca is only about 1.7 miles wide. You could swim across it in under an hour. Through that gap passes roughly 40% of global trade by value, around 3.4 trillion every year. For comparison, Germany, the largest economy in Europe, produces about 4.5 trillion of economic output annually. Germany has highways, rail networks, factories, airports, and dozens of ports. The Strait of Malacca is just a gap in a coastline. The passages are ancient. The ships are not. Geography explains why the choke points exist. It doesn't explain why they've become so dangerous. For that, you have to look at the ships. In the 1950s, the largest cargo ships carried roughly 15,000 tons. The Ever Given carries about 220,000. The canal it got stuck in was built in 1869. The Strait of Hormuz is the same 21 miles wide it was when the first oil tanker passed through. The Strait of Malacca hasn't moved. The ships grew by a factor of 15. The passages didn't grow at all. This is the problem. Bigger ships mean fewer ships making more voyages, which means fewer redundancies when a passage closes. A single disruption removes a larger share of total capacity than it would have removed 50 years ago. The Ever Given, sideways in the Suez, wasn't blocking one ship's cargo. It was blocking the cargo of an entire vessel class. The problem goes beyond the ships. The ports built around these routes represent hundreds of billions in fixed capital. Cranes, berths, warehousing, rail connections, all of it optimized for ships of a specific size arriving through specific passages. Redirecting global trade isn't a logistics decision, it's a century-long infrastructure rebuild. The 2015 Suez expansion, designed to handle the new generation of megaships, took a decade and cost $8 billion. The result? While the ships had grown by a factor of 15, the canal widened by only about 100 feet. Every step made sense. Bigger ships reduced shipping costs. Ports expanded to handle them. Companies built supply chains that depended on deliveries arriving exactly when expected. Each decision made the system more efficient. Together, they made it much harder to adapt when something went wrong. So what happens when one of these passages doesn't just slow down, but closes? Each passage has a specific, named, non-hypothetical threat. This isn't speculation, it's the last 5 years. The Strait of Hormuz carries roughly 20% of global oil supply and a quarter of the world's liquefied natural gas. Iran sits on its northern shore. For decades, closure was a threat. Then, in early 2026, following US and Israeli strikes on Iran, the IRGC closed it. Tanker traffic collapsed, mines went into the water, and the global oil market convulsed. As of the time I'm recording this, a ceasefire has produced at least a partial reopening, but passage through the strait remains contested. Tolls are being charged, and full flows aren't expected to resume for months at a minimum. The threat was never hypothetical. We just hadn't seen it executed yet. Now we have. The Suez Canal spent most of 2024 in active disruption. Yemen's Houthi movement began targeting commercial vessels transiting the Red Sea in late 2023. By early 2024, Maersk, MSC, and Hapag-Lloyd had suspended Red Sea transits entirely. Hundreds of vessels rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope, adding 10 to 14 days and thousands of miles per voyage. Maersk reported per-voyage cost increases exceeding $1 million per ship. Container shipping rates doubled. The Strait of Malacca faces a different pressure. Piracy is a manageable risk. The more significant threat is structural. US-China competition over Taiwan means that any military escalation in the South China Sea puts Malacca's stability in direct play. Neither side has acted, both sides have options. The Panama Canal's crisis in 2023 and 2024 had no human adversary at all. A drought dropped water levels in Gatun Lake, the reservoir that feeds the canal's locks, until the Canal Authority cut daily transits from 36 to 22 ships, a 40% capacity reduction, caused entirely by a dry season. No attack, no political dispute, just rain that didn't come. Each choke point has a different vulnerability. Hormuz is geopolitical. The Red Sea is military. Panama depends on rainfall. Malacca sits beside one of the world's most contested regions. Different causes, same result. 4 different threats, 4 different regions, but the same single point of failure every time. When any one of these choke points stops working, the consequences spread far beyond that stretch of water. So why not build new routes? Countries have been trying to build new routes for a long time. China has invested hundreds of billions of dollars in overland rail and road corridors connecting Asia and Europe. Russia promotes the Northern Sea Route through the Arctic. New canal proposals have been floated for decades. None of these ideas are fantasies. Governments are spending real money trying to make them work. The problem is economics. Moving freight by rail costs several times more than moving it by sea. That's manageable for high-value goods. It isn't for grain, iron ore, oil, or the millions of containers filled with everyday products. Ocean shipping is still dramatically cheaper. The Arctic faces a different problem. It requires specialized ships, expensive infrastructure, and passes through Russian territory. Even as the ice retreats, it remains a niche route rather than a replacement. Building new canals isn't much easier. The proposed Nicaragua Canal stalled under the weight of financing and engineering challenges. Finding another place where a canal is both physically possible and economically worthwhile turns out to be extraordinarily rare. It's not that we haven't tried to build alternatives. It's that the world already organized itself around the bottlenecks. Geography didn't just shape the map, it shaped the economics of global trade. That's why one ship stuck in a canal could change the price of olive oil in a grocery store thousands of miles away. The global economy feels almost limitless. Products arrive from the other side of the planet, most of the time exactly when they're supposed to. It's easy to imagine a world where trade flows in every direction, with endless routes connecting every market. But the map says otherwise. A surprising share of global trade still depends on a handful of narrow passages carved by geography, long before humans built ships, ports, or supply chains. Together, they created a world where a disruption in one narrow stretch of water can ripple through the global economy. Not because the system is broken, because that's how the system works. The world changes constantly. The map changes almost never. And that's why geography keeps shaping history long after we've stopped noticing it. Geography doesn't just shape global trade. It can also hold entire countries together. I've linked a video here that shows how Pennsylvania's position made it the backbone of the American economy. The world has a structure. Let's keep finding it.